Hello and welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, your daily guide to decoding current affairs the smart way for UPSC. It's November 29th, 2025, and today's edition brings two high-impact analysis articles for Mains 2026. First, the emerging Nvidia versus Google AI chip rivalry. We will be looking into what it means for the future of computing, geopolitical tech competition, and India's own semiconductor ambitions. Second, India's disaster response and federalism. We will be having a timely look at the center-state coordination, constitutional responsibilities, and lessons from recent crises. Lastly, in our simplified section, we will be covering various articles which are extremely important from the perspective of upcoming prelims 2026 examination. So let's begin. Guys, this article from the Indian Express is focusing on the rivalry between Nvidia and Google on the control and monopoly of the AI infrastructure of the entire world. Because right now we have seen how the AI boom is actually a reality in recent times. The companies which will be dominating the supply chain, the manufacturing, the distribution, and all things related to AI will be dominating the rest of the 21st century. And this is exactly what these two companies are focused on. And even when we talk about the very big tech companies such as Microsoft, such as Intel, even Meta, these are nowhere near Nvidia and Google, who are right now the pioneers in the entire AI race. Why? Because we have to understand that when it comes to artificial intelligence and the new technologies associated with them, it has been Nvidia which has been actually deploying its graphical processing units or GPUs in the AI race when it comes to investing in various companies related to AI. Also, when we talk about OpenAI, which is actually the mother company of ChatGPT, it also heavily uses Nvidia chips. But recently something interesting happened. Gemini 3, the Google AI's own kind of foundational software, was launched, and this is presenting a direct challenge to Nvidia's dominance. So this is exactly what we will be looking also from the lens of India's own interests, and also because we have to be aware from a GS3 perspective of IT and computers. So let us exactly know right now what exactly happened. Now, a recent report by the information a media outlet leaked that Meta, or the parent of Facebook, right, it will or it might be using Google's new chips for its AI functions. Now, Google's own chips are right now known as TPUs, and Meta might be using them for their new data centers which are dedicated to AI and various other purposes. Now, this is a straight challenge to Nvidia, which recently became $5 trillion valued companies, where Google is still yet to touch around 4 to 5 trillion mark. After such a disappointing stock result, Nvidia launched an aggressive response on social media. Nvidia said that they are generation ahead of Google when it comes to GPUs and their manufacturing and their use in day-to-day AI applications. Also, Nvidia claimed that it is the only platform for everything related to AI. And at the end of the day, Nvidia is prioritizing versatility. That is, its GPUs are much more versatile than the specialized chips of Google. Firstly, let us go back to our childhood days. We have seen a computer in our homes or in our schools, right? Generally, there was one PC, as you can see here. Inside the PC, there was one CPU who was the boss of that computer, because it was actually kind of controlling all the functions, the complex tasks, and various other roles. And it was mainly the Intel and the AMD tech companies which were leading in such CPU manufacturing and distribution. And also, in some of our computers, right, we also had one very important chip known as the graphical processing units. This is also popularly known as the graphics card, which enabled you to play Call of Duty, FIFA, and so many other graphically intensive games. Now, such games or such programs such as video editing, it requires a lot of computing power. When it comes to computing power, it generally means how fast that computer can solve some complex problems and deliver us those games and those video editing skills. Now come to right now in 2025. We are right now living in an AI era, where most of the functions in our day-to-day lives are easily facilitated by the use of AI. AI recently has been increasing our productivity in almost all spheres of our lives. Talk about governance, talk about technology, talk about various other, even military and various other economic and trading purposes. We are using AI in everything right now. And you already know that AI is actually a very computing heavy application. That means to run an AI application properly, you need loads and loads of computing power. Who is supplying those computing power? The graphical processing unit. Those old graphics card which was at one time, kind of parallelly significant with the CPU. Right now, the CPU or the central processing unit and its dominance is decreasing, because right now you can use as many GPUs in the computers to run as many complex tasks, including blockchain, including crypto mining, including various other purposes such as AI applications. And it is Nvidia, whose chips such as the GPUs actually do parallel processing. That means they can process various complex applications at one point of time. And this is exactly what we have to understand, that these AI and GPUs are heavily interlinked with each other, and it has been Nvidia whose chips has been increasingly been used in the last decades for various neural network training, which is actually the main mother network of AI. Also the various large data sets and their processing, rendering various simulations, everything was kind of done with Nvidia chips, because the other companies such as Intel and Nvidia, they generally focused on the CPUs. It was Nvidia which was majorly the primary company in the GPU world. There is a UPSC PYQ from 2020. I want all of you to do one simple task. Imagine that you are in 2020 and right now look at all these applications. Imagine what would be the answer in 2020 and what is the answer right now in 2025. Based on this, you let me know in the comments below. And right now, when we are looking at the technological fight, we have just understood the very basics of CPUs and the GPUs. Now come to Google's own specialized chips. These are known as the ASICs, or these are the application specific integrated circuits. Now these ASICs can generally do some specialized tasks, or those tasks which you can generally give to it, it will be doing that particular task in a particular way. But when we come to Nvidia's own GPUs, right, these are the chips which can do so many multiples of tasks. That means it is much more versatile than Google's own GPUs, right? And this is exactly what the entire debate is upon, correct? But when we talk about Google's own chips, which are kind of specialized, they are actually very, very powerful when we talk about that particular task itself. So that is why we have to understand that they are actually highly optimized for all of the specific tasks. Now, when we talk about how this entire rivalry happened between AI race of Google and Nvidia, we have to kind of analyze the two companies separately. When we talk about Nvidia's own domination, I just stated that Nvidia began very, very early. That means around 10 to 20 years ago, Nvidia was supplying the various GPUs in our computers. From that, it kind of built an entire ecosystem based on hardware, software, optimization, tooling, and so many other technological supremacy that it kind of developed over the years. Also, the architectural fit for the various applications of AI, blockchain, and various other applications were suited by Nvidia over a period of time. So based on the various feedback from these technologies and the negative, say, infrastructural deficits, Nvidia kind of repaired and built upon it, kind of increased its investments over a period of time. And also at one time, they have right now 70% profit margin. And this enables them to invest the excess profit into further research and development. The more research and development that you do, the better your company and your future profits will be. As simple as that. And this is exactly what they did. They scaled up their entire business operations, the business model, and over a period of time, they actually launched a lot of products, right? From Hopper to Blackwell, these are all the products, names of the various GPUs. They kind of progressed like this. When we talk about Google has been kind of investing their efforts over a decade, but they have been doing it entirely in their labs, right? We do not have a Google chip commercially available for the last decade or so. And this is what they have done, this entire development internally. And right now they have come up with their own TPUs or ASICs, which are much more energy efficient and also cost effective, but they do specialized tasks. On the other hand, let me repeat again that the Nvidia chips are much more versatile and flexible. Correct? And right now a very significant thing happened recent times. Gemini 3 was launched, and if you can compare Gemini 3 with all the other AI models, as you can see here, it is much more ahead than all of the rest of the applications. Now this kind of development sent shockwaves across the entire AI system. Now this progress of Google based on their own chips of TPU, this sent shockwaves across the markets, and this also kind of made Nvidia worry of the fact that Google is right now on the race with Nvidia. Now, when we talk about the main supply chain of the GPUs, we can trace the origin of Google and Nvidia to the same company, which is known by the name of Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. Now you know that this company is not designing the chips. They are not putting in their mind and efforts and putting in all of the various technological improvements that you have to do. But this is the company you have to look for when we talk about manufacturing those GPUs. Now they are controlling most of the manufacturing of the AI chips in the entire world, right? Because Google and Nvidia do not make those chips, they only design them. When we talk about manufacturing, it is a TSMC which is doing all of these things. And if you understand that you are one single company and you have two and various other big clients who wants your chips, who wants your manufactured chips, right? You have to wait in lines. And TSMC will be giving importance to only those clients which are actually quite dominant. So in this entire AI race, so far we have understood that Nvidia is number one. So it will be at the very first waiting queue. After that we have Google, and after that we have so many other companies. So this is exactly what we have to understand, that Nvidia is right now at the front of the line and Google has to wait for it. But we have an issue, guys. We have seen that there are so many companies waiting in line to get the GPUs, but TSMC on the other hand is telling that they won't be opening any new factories. Why? Because it believes that we are right now in an AI bubble. Recently, a very big investment firm known as SoftBank, it also withdrew billions of dollars from Nvidia. Why? Because if you can look at this figure is designating what is known as an AI bubble. This means that Nvidia is at the center with its technological supremacy in GPUs, and we have so many other companies, the very big tech companies we have such as Microsoft, Intel, Oracle and various other companies, right? Even OpenAI we have here, who have been using Nvidia's own kind of applications. And this is what the TSMC is also worried about, that if we all are dependent on one company, and if at any one point of time there are some issues in Nvidia or there are some issues with the various big investments which are coming with the same, this bubble can burst anytime. So this investors and its optimism, while it is good for the economy and good for AI development, because a lot of money will be coming into AI research and the companies can use that money for better technologies in the future. But on the other hand, any kind of mismanagement, any kind of worries or rumors can lead to the bursting of the bubble of AI and can lead to the loss of so very big investments. And this is exactly what we have to understand, that TSMC is not rushing as of now. It is taking its time to analyze what is going on. But at the other hand, we have to also understand this only will be helping Nvidia, because remember we have talked about this is at the very first in the line. So various other companies still have to wait painfully. And right now, when we have just looked at the rivalry between the very big tech companies, right now we have to focus on our own country, that is India. And when we talk about India, the semiconductor chips or the GPUs which are dedicated for AI will be the foundation of our own AI ecosystem. Because the main problem in India is that we do not have a dedicated semiconductor company which is dominant at the international level. And also, we import all of the high compute AI chips from the US. So we are kind of dependent on the US for most of the applications that we do in India. For example, we have the various Indian startups, right, which are focused on AI, such as Kisan AI, the Sarvam, and the various other companies. They depend on the chips which are imported from the US. Also, recently, Nvidia has launched its own Indian strategy, such as collaborating with Reliance and Tata to build AI supercomputing data centers in India itself. But on the other hand, there are various risks which are involved, because we have to understand that Reliance and Tata, they are, while right now investing in Nvidia chips, these are also very costly, right? And also we have to understand that if Nvidia's dominance reduces, these companies and the investment that Reliance and Tata have done, they also will be gone. So this is exactly what we have to understand. And that is why in recent times, India's own semiconductor PLI mission was launched, right? And this is actually focusing on the various modules of the semiconductors that we have to produce in the country, and we have to build a proper supply chain of semiconductors, right? But we have to understand that when we talk about strategic autonomy and national security, AI is involved in this kind of sectors, be it defense, be it economy, be it even the research firms, be it the IITs, be it the universities. We have AI applications everywhere. And this is exactly what we have to understand. We have to secure our future in this AI ecosystem. And at the end of the day, we have to also appreciate the fact that geoeconomics is a reality, because US under Donald Trump will obviously be pressuring the entire world to accept Nvidia and the various other big tech companies which are in the US, and it will be very interested to supply AI chips or say the GPUs to us. So this is exactly what we have to understand. This is what US interests are. On the other hand, China also wants their own chip sovereignty. That means that China wants to have their own chips based on their own technology, and these are very two big countries with very big resources. And this is exactly what we have to understand, that India is also not leaving behind. India is building its own foundation of AI's system, and recently the cabinet has approved around 10,300 crore of India AI mission. And under the same, we are trying to bring down the cost of AI chips or the GPUs, because this will be procured by the government of India. So around 10,000 GPUs will be given to the startups at extremely subsidized rate by the government, so that we can have our own data centers, our own large language model which will be multimodal, and various other aspects. Also, we have to understand that the money that India will be spending on the chips, right, will be kind of costly, because we are right now procuring the chips from Nvidia, and we have just seen that Nvidia has been keeping around 70% margin. That means they are artificially kind of inflating the profits, right? And this is what we have to understand. The entire world is right now paying an Nvidia tax. That is just the other name of the highly priced GPU prices of Nvidia. So if at all right now, if Google brings in their cost-effective chips, it will be better for us as a country, because they will be much more competitive, and Nvidia will also have to reduce their prices over a period of time. So this is exactly what the future will be looking like. It will be very interesting to see what happens, and for the perspective of your examination, this is what this article was. We had one PYQ in 2023 on AI, and right now that is why you can practice the same to write better answers using the information that we have looked into this article. Now we will be moving into the next one. In this article from the Hindu, we are going to understand the intricate linkage of disaster management and federalism in the country, because according to the article, the recent spate of disasters and the trend of financing from the central government to the state governments is actually going against cooperative federalism. And we have to analyze this article from the lens of GS3, disaster and disaster management. When we start from the very core argument that whether federalism in crisis or not, we have to recollect just one incident in the recent times. That is from 2024, the Wayanad landslides. Now, these landslides took place in Kerala, and this claimed the lives of more than 150 people there. And after such tragedy, Kerala's Chief Minister sought around 2,200 crore from the central government, and in response, according to various reports, the central government approved only 260 crore, that is around 11% of the demand, while quoting that there are unspent state disaster response fund with the Kerala government at the tune of 780 crore, and there were earlier interest-free loans which were given to the Kerala government. So these two were the reasons which were given by the central government for giving 11% of the fund which was demanded. Now, according to various experts and the critics, this was kind of a very controversial step by the central government. Why? Because the same pattern was seen in Tamil Nadu, in Karnataka, in Himachal Pradesh and various other states. And here, the editorial is mainly stressing upon the fact that disasters are right now becoming extremely heavy burden on the state governments, because the state governments have to spend from their own money on the various disaster relief, rehabilitation and the various aspects. So this is exactly what we have to understand, that center is using its discretionary power to withhold the various funds to be given to the state governments. So this is what the editorial is talking about. Now, let us understand firstly the very basics of how our disaster finance system works. Now, when we talk about the State Disaster Response Fund versus the National Disaster Response Funds, right? The SDRF purpose is actually for immediate relief, right? After the disaster has took place, we have to immediately give relief to the people. And here, when we talk about SDRF, 75% is contributed by the center when we talk about the normal states, and 90% when we talk about the northeastern plus Himalayan states. But the key restrictions for the SDRF is that we cannot use this for long-term reconstruction of various projects which can prevent a disaster tomorrow. Also, we have to spend to limited approved items only. And when we talk about the NDRF, this is for severe disasters exceeding the state capacity. So firstly, when we talk about the disasters, the SDRF will be coming into picture, and after the same, the NDRF will be coming into picture in terms of funding. Now, apart from NDRF and SDRF, we also have the 15th Finance Commission and its recommendations to set up the national and state disaster mitigation funds apart from this system. Also, the 15th Finance Commission has proposed to frame a disaster risk index based on which we have the ranking of such states also which are facing the highest vulnerability of disasters, such as Maharashtra, West Bengal, Uttar Pradesh and so many other states. So we can see this is the finance system when it comes to disaster, but this system is failing. Firstly, the compensation that is given to the victims are outdated. When we talk about the amount, we are still having a decade back amount of 4 lakh rupees if a life is lost and 1.2 lakh rupees for a fully damaged house. Imagine these figures to be presently applied in the recent disasters, which are actually quite low. Also, we also have ambiguous classification of the severe disasters, because the center decides whether the disaster is severe or not, and based on that we have the NDRF funds. So we can understand that this is too much of discretion on the central government, because there can be delays in notifying a disaster as severe disaster, and also sometimes there are risks of politicization of the relief measures and the relief funds. Next, when the relief funds are released, they are facing so many bureaucratic hurdles. Sometimes when we talk about the entire procedure of such funds, there has to be a state memorandum stating the need for the funds. After the same, the central assessment team will be visiting the site. After this, the high level committee will be approving the funds if at all we are needing the same or not. And at the end of the day, a final announcement will be given. So if you can understand, this will be taking minimum of say a couple of days, if not weeks. So this means that we do not have an automatic trigger of the funds to be released just after the disaster to that particular state. Also, the states are suffering during that delay, because mostly the states do not have the funds of their own. They have to use various other funds from various other schemes which affect the day-to-day governance of the state government. Also, the Finance Commission allocation formula according to the editorial is kind of faulty. Why? Because in the 15th Finance Commission, we are using population, area, forest, income distance, tax efforts and various demographic performance. But nowhere we are mentioning the ecological imperatives of say excessive rainfall, landslides, exposure, cyclone frequency, climate vulnerability. So these things are not mentioned. But in the recent times, as we can understand, that the natural disasters are actually on the rise due to climate change. So maybe the next Finance Commission must be including those as a separate kind of a formula of the funds to be given to the state governments. And at the end of the day, when we talk about the loss versus assistance, we have to understand that disaster financing sometimes becomes negotiation between the state and the central government. It has been alleged by various critics that the states which have the same party at the state and the central level, they kind of get the funds very easily. On the other hand, the states which do not have the same, they struggle with the funds. And this is exactly what we have also had to understand, that the Kerala government had been suffering from the lack of such relief funds for over 3 months, and this is leading to mostly the families and the victims awaiting the same. And this is leading to humanitarian crisis in that particular area. So this is what we have to understand, that such situation needs to be addressed at the earliest. But before that, you have a 2023 PYQ based on the 15th Finance Commission and the horizontal tax devolution. If you know the answer, let me know in the comments below. So right now, it is a time to understand what are the lessons we can learn from the rest of the world. Firstly, when we talk about USA, it has its own, apparatus known as the FEMA when it comes to managing the disasters in the US. For example, it uses a formula of giving per capita damage thresholds to the federal governments. Also, the Mexican country is having automatic payments whenever we have excess rainfall or winds or various other natural disasters to the states. Philippines also have the same when it comes to rainfall and fatality index. Automatically the funds also are kind of calculated based on the losses and the damages. Then when we talk about African countries and some Caribbean countries, we have satellite based parametric insurance, which is a kind of an insurance which looks at the data and gives accurate kind of insurance compensation after the disaster has taken place. Also, when we talk about Australia, they have also the federal aid with reference to the percentage of the money that the state government is spending on some natural disaster. So that kind of fund or that kind of percentage will be delineated by the central Australian government. So we can learn from these progressive schemes. Also, India can implement some progressive statements. For example, the 16th Finance Commission, whose recommendations are not yet out still, they can try to modernize the relief norms. They can create an objective evaluation. For example, the objective evaluation of the 16th Finance Commission can be based on some excessive rainfall intensity index or fatalities per million, loss to state GDP ratio, and also the satellite based early damage estimation. So these are some objective criteria. So based on this, we should be automatically delineating funds for the various state governments. Next, the 16th Finance Commission must be recommending to introduce vulnerability based allocations before even a disaster is striking, so that some of the Himalayan states and the northeastern states and the various Western Ghats and the states in those areas or the various other areas which are actually vulnerable to climate change and such crisis, they can have the funds before a disaster is striking. Next, we also have to protect the state's fiscal autonomy, because spending on disaster drains a lot of funds of the state governments. So we should be coming up with more mechanisms, with more funds which should be at the state government's discretion for such disasters. And at the end of the day, we have to reduce the procedures and the various bureaucratic hurdles of the central government when it comes to the funds of the NDRF. So that is why we have to have a rules-based approach as of now. Apart from this, we have to update the recent relief norms and the various thresholds and the various compensation and the various damages per house, and we have to update it with 2025 price levels. Also, when we talk about the risks, right, we have to focus on the vulnerability too, not just what is the damage which is taking place in a population. We have to also be prepared to actually understand what can happen before. For this, we need the applications of satellites, we need artificial intelligence, we need so many other tools such as Internet of Things, and we will be having a better vulnerability index based on such. Also, we have to give the states operational freedom, because they are the governments which will be operating at the very ground level. And at the end, we have to avoid giving loans and debt to the state governments for disaster management, because disaster management should not be a liability on the state governments. We should be giving more grants, more aids, which the state governments need not return back to the central government. So this is exactly what the entire topic was upon. There is a practice question for all of you. You can practice, and now we'll be moving on to the simplified articles. The Indian Express has a very interesting article on the multipolar world and how technological supremacy will be the power going forward. We have just seen in the very first article, which is actually on the AI race. Right now, we are actually talking about the collaboration of some countries such as Australia, Canada, and India on technological and innovation cooperation. So this is exactly what we are going to understand, that India, Australia, and Canada has launched this ACT partnership. This partnership is a trilateral cooperation between these three countries, which are having some correlation and some mutual interest between themselves. Firstly, this was launched at the G20 summit in Johannesburg in South Africa, and this was mainly formed to boost cooperation in clean energy, diversified supply chains, critical minerals, and also mass development and application of AI or artificial intelligence. And also this kind of collaboration will be demonstrating the shifting from the multilateral consensus or the multilateral bodies of UN or the WTO, who in recent times have not been functioning well because they are kind of listening to the whims and fancies of the developed world, the Western world, and also to Chinese funding. So this is exactly what these countries have recognized, and they are trying to have a mini-lateralism between themselves. We will be understanding what mini-lateralism is in the next slide, but let us actually understand what strengths all of these countries have to have such a partnership in the very beginning. When it comes to Australia, we know that Australia is well known for its critical mineral production of lithium and rare earth. So India can benefit from them. And also we have seen in recent times how India has also deepened its kind of mining and energy security procurement, such as coal requirements from Australia. When it comes to Canada, we have seen how in recent times we have improved ties with Canadian country. And also Canada is leading in AI research, deep tech technologies such as machine learning, blockchain technologies, and various other financial technologies too. And also they are focused on clean energy technology. On the other hand, India has our own very huge talent pool of Indians who are kind of increasingly becoming skilled. We are also beginning our manufacturing and the digital public infrastructure in India. The various digital tools that we use from our day-to-day life, such as UPI and various other services, can attract the various talents from the Canadian and the Australian countries. So this is exactly what we are trying to expect, and through such trilateral cooperation, we are trying to move towards an agile minilateralism from those old age multilateralism where these UN and the WTO are not functioning well in recent times. So we are seeing a shift in global cooperation. We also can understand the recent examples, for example the Quad, which is where the India, US, Japan and Australian countries are, which is focusing on maritime security, critical emerging technologies. We also have the India-US cooperation on the trust and ISAT boundaries, right? We also have AUKUS, where India is not there, but Australia, UK and US is also there, which is kind of seen as a defense pact in so many other applications of technologies too. So these are the recent alliances which are known as minilateralism. Why? Because all of these countries are right now kind of diverging its own strategic interests with other countries, right? And they are kind of converging on those interests with those countries. And this is where there will be various benefits. For India, we are aspiring to become a global EV manufacturer. So this supply of critical materials and so many other aspects of clean energy will be helping us in this manner. Also, Canada's research in AI can help to propel AI leadership in the country and bring in AI investments in India. Also, India's own DPI in health and finance, which will be handy when it comes to funds and investment and research coming from Australia and Canada, and also we can reduce the dependence on any single country such as the US or even China. So when it comes to the ECT model and it's working, this will be taking place via various joint research and developments between these trilateral countries. We can also have supply chain deals between these three countries when it comes to clean technology and the various other aspects. Also the standards and governance and the various rules when it comes to AI governance and AI ethics all will be converging on a single platform. And at the end of the day, the three countries can also launch some of their own pilot projects for the cooperation of these three countries. Now when we talk about the benefits for Canada and Australia, we have already seen how the recent announcement by the PMO, which has nudged and encouraged the Coal India Limited to invest in critical minerals in Australia. In a separate statement, our own Union Minister for Commerce and Industry has pitched for AI, clean energy and critical minerals cooperation between India and Canada. So we can understand that these two countries can move beyond just manufacturing raw materials to supply the same via integrated chains with India. On the other hand, India offers a very big market and a very big talent pool. For the entire world, this is kind of a learning to cooperate on a global scale and also have resilient supply chain that maybe countries in Africa or Latin America can actually benefit from. Next, we also have to appreciate that this trilateral cooperation is founded on the democratic principles between these countries. And at the end of the day, we are also kind of projecting an alternative ecosystem from the US and the Chinese systems, which are kind of dominating the supply chains right now. So it will be very interesting to see how this spans out, but there are some challenges to solve. Firstly, we have the Chinese factor, that already the Chinese investments in clean technology, in solar manufacturing, in various other aspects are there. So there are large investments and time which has already been spent by so many other countries. So it has to be seen how India, Australia and Canada can offer cost-effective investments between themselves. Next, when it comes to costs, right? Now, these new green technologies, clean technologies, AI development, research and development also will be coming up with extra added costs. Now, this also must be factored in. Also, the regulatory alignment of AI, clean energy across these trilateral countries need a convergence. The AI, the data centers and the export control all need to be having similar standards, similar rules. So, the countries have to be sitting down and discussing on the same. Also, the trust and the geopolitics are very fragile right now because the US tensions are there with reference to tariffs and the various external conflicts also which are taking place in the entire world. So those are also kind of some impediments that these three countries have to negotiate between themselves. Also, the technological transfers and the intellectual property rights and the sharing of the benefits out of the various technology and the transfer which will be happening from Canada and Australia to India, and the potential disputes that can arise out of the same in India or say in Australia and Canada, those things must also be streamlined way before even such things happen. So this was all for this topic. Now we'll be moving on to the next one. Guys, RBI has actually come up with new norms for digital banking channels. Let us actually understand what they are. Now, we do online banking, we do mobile banking, we have various ATMs which are linked on a online platform, we have tablet banking. Even right now we are doing banking with the help of AI assistants known as voice banking, wearable banking and so many other aspects. So this is nothing but the entire ecosystem of online banking and how the new banks and the existing banks are offering various features and the services based on such devices. So this is exactly what we have to understand, that in recent times there are so many banks which are coming up with new products of online banking, and in the meantime we are witnessing so many frauds, so many transactions which are not taking place, and at the end of the day the consumers are suffering. So this is exactly why the RBI has come up with such norms. Now these norms will be mandatory for all the banks to actually obtain the various consent from their customers for providing digital banking services, right? And such services must be fully recorded or documented. Next, RBI also observed a very peculiar phenomena, that there are various banks which actually tell their customer that if you want to take a loan, you have to sign for our own digital banking facilities or channels. RBI told that this cannot happen, right? Because this will be going against, kind of say equal principle for all of the banks and all of the customers. And sometimes the customers can also be lured in some traps. Also, the banks can continue to obtain the various records or mobile numbers of the customers with reference to any KYC requirements, right? Because KYC requirements are very important for identification of the various people and giving some targeted beneficiaries to those customers or various norms, and also for various investigation purposes you need the KYC norms to be updated. So that is why the RBI actually told that okay, for KYC purposes such things can be mandatory. Also, the banks will be needing to put in various risk mitigation measures in accordance with the various policies such as transaction limits, transaction velocity limit, fraud checks, and also their risk perception, because in the recent times there are rising instances of various digital frauds, even digital arrests which are taking place right now. So this is why how fast or the velocity of your transfer or transactions, how fast your funds are being transferred from one account to another, these all will be tracked by your bank. Also, the various other impact and the changes is that the banks must be obtaining proper documental records. Next, also, the non-application mobile banking must be working across telecom networks. For example, say there are some online banking channels which do not have a mobile applications or any website. You can avail of them by only calling a particular telecom number and the bank will be giving you that service. And also for such applications, the bank cannot discriminate between the telecom networks. So those services must be available across all of them. Also, the third party or the promoter or any other company which would want to advertise on the bank's digital channels, right, or say they want to display their information on digital bank channels, they also cannot do the same without RBI permission. Next, the RBI can also exempt all of these norms for some specialized banks or some specialized institutions. And at the end of the day, if RBI or any payment platform such as Visa, MasterCard or NPCI has more strict rules on such digital banking channels, then those strict rules will be applying and those RBI rules will not apply. Because right now the RBI wants more strict rules for the online banking channels. And this is why the more strict, the better regulation it would be. So this is what was all for this article. We will be now moving on to the next one. Guys, a major road safety program has been given a facelift because the Bharat NCAP is right now being upgraded to Bharat NCAP 2.0, and this is extremely important for your disaster management because this program specifically focuses on the safety of Indian roads. Let us understand firstly via two very simple terms. Firstly, roadworthiness is determining how fit your car is to run on the Indian roads. Is your lights working? Is your brakes working? Or is your pollution and the various other certificates on or up to date? These are all the features or all the objectives that determine the roadworthiness principle. Now, when we talk about a much more comprehensive and a complete principle, this is known as crash worthiness. God forbid, if any crash happens, crash worthiness will be examining into how well that car will be protecting the people inside the car and also outside the car. So this is exactly what the Bharat NCAP is focusing on. For example, if there is a new car by a manufacturer which is slated for release into the markets, so this car will be going through various tests and also various accidents tests. Now Bharat NCAP is actually talking about rating the various new vehicles on their crash worthiness, right? And this means that these companies will be running comprehensive tests on those cars on which they want to give the tag of Bharat NCAP. This means that this is not mandatory for all the car manufacturers, but this will be mandatory for those car manufacturers who will be seeking the claim that okay, this car is Bharat NCAP 2.0 certified. So based on this, the Bharat NCAP will be providing the safety ratings for such vehicles for crash testing and evaluation criteria, right? So these guidelines are mainly for those manufacturers only who want to display such rating on their cars, and also in their marketing campaigns, if those manufacturers want to promote their cars that these cars are actually NCAP certified. So this is unique because it is actually focusing on crash worthiness, which is a step beyond just having lights or pollution norms and whatsoever. If you can understand, this is the NCAP logo here, and right now we have to actually understand what is new in Bharat NCAP 2.0, which is right now still a draft. This means the final version will be released after expert consultations and deliberations in the future. As of now, when we compare the Bharat NCAP 2023 and the 2.0 in 2025, if you can understand, the NCAP of 2023 focused on three verticals, that is adult occupant protection, child occupation protection, and safety assets technologies. So these are the various parameters. Apart from this, we have 5 parameters right now in the 2025 NCAP. We have crash protection, which is having the highest weightage of 55%, extremely important for your prelims examination. Next, we have the weightage of vulnerable road user protection. Next, we have safe driving and accident avoidance. And at the end, we have the post-crash safety. And when we talk about 2023 test, there were kind of 3 tests which were mandatory, which is looking at the front impact of the car, the side impact of the car, and the pole impact of the car. But when we talk about the crash test in the recent one, we have many tests right now, which is much more comprehensive test, right? We have frontal impact, safe side impact also. We have the accident brake impact, we have full width frontal impact, and the rear impact also. So this means that we are having the goal of comprehensive safety in the recent 2025 norms, right? And this is we are upgrading due to the fact that we want to be aligned with the global standards, because most of the world has moved on to such standards of such comprehensive tests, right? And also this will be giving a future readiness of our manufacturing cars too. Now, when we talk about the vulnerable road users such as pedestrians and motorcycles, this is the very first time in India we are having this kind of protection, right? For example, here for only pedestrians safety, we are having mandatory testing. For example, pedestrian legroom impacts, adult head form impacts, child head form impacts, and the various optional technologies such as the autonomous emergency braking system, and the child pedestrians, adult pedestrians, and the car to motorcycle scenarios. So all of the simulations will be run, and how safe that car is for pedestrians will be evaluated, and then only we will be getting this Bharat NCAP 2.0 tag. And also, when we talk about the NCAP generally gives you ratings. That means it can give you 1 star to 5 star rating. So to actually have 5 star rating, you need to meet all the criteria as you can see here, right? So when we talk about the various star systems, the highest star will be the 5 star, which are the safest kind of cars as you can see here, right? The older system has various other parameters and scores. If you can see, the new 2025 standards have much more stricter norms, while only the 3 star rating have the same kind of parameters but much more rigorous testing which has been involved within that also. The safest cars will be those cars which will be having 5 stars. That means they will be having all the electronic stability system, side protection system, also 80 plus points from all those various other parameters and the other systems as you can see here. So this means that we have some of the benefits which will be accruing from such 2.0 norms. Firstly, we can choose more safer cars in the markets. The manufacturers, they can build safer cars, they can export them, they can also go for various technological upgradations. Also, if those manufacturers in India aligns to such norms, because these are not mandatory norms, these are only mandatory for those manufacturers who want to display this tag for marketing purpose and for various safety purpose. So this will be aligning India with global standards and will be improving India's own image internationally. And at the end of the day, if you see, India is having one of the highest rates of road accidents in the entire world. So this also will be reducing with such new benchmarks. Now we'll be moving on to the next article. Guys, the recent quarterly figures of the GDP are out, and it is very important for us to understand what was important in the last quarter when it pertains to Indian economy and Indian economic development. Now guys, I want to tell you one very important thing, that we will be having such data on a quarterly basis in the newspapers. While remembering the exact data is not important, but remembering the trends of the various sectors based on the quarters will be very essential if you want to write top-notch answers in your mains examination. Also, for your prelims purposes, you will be understanding how the trends actually fluctuate between the various quarters of an economy. So it is very important to note some important observations while not noting all the facts and the numbers here. So only you have to focus on the important concepts and the facts. Firstly, understand that the GDP growth has been accelerating at 8.2% in the current year. Also, when we can look at this growth, this was mainly led by manufacturing and financial services, right? And this is the highest in the last 6 quarters. This is to be remembered. Now, when we talk about the real GDP and the nominal GDP, we know that the nominal GDP, when it adjusts for inflation, it becomes real GDP. So you can understand that the nominal GDP is right now at 8.7% and the real GDP after adjusting for inflation is at 8.2%. On the other hand, we also have some very basic concepts of GDP and the GVA, that the GDP is calculated by adding net indirect taxes, which includes indirect taxes such as the GST and also the various subsidies which are given by the government. So if you can relate, GDP is actually GVA plus net indirect taxes. Now we need to look at a very basic concept which has been mentioned in the article, which is by the term of GDP equal to GVA plus net indirect taxes. This means that if you want to convert GDP to GVA, you have to use this formula, which is very important for your prelims examination, guys. And this net indirect taxes is actually including the indirect taxes such as GST and minusing the subsidies. And why this GVA versus GDP difference is very important? Because it helps us to understand and analyze how our net indirect taxes has been increasing or decreasing. It gives a very crucial information into what are the various taxation rates in the country and how the tax growth is improving over a period of time, right? And also recently we had the GST 2.0 reforms. So this figure can actually give us good implications and good pictures whether these reforms of GST 2.0 were reflected in the GDP figures or not. So this was what we had to understand right now. When we look at the sectoral performance, we have the primary sector, right, which grew at around 3.5%. Finally, we have the secondary sector and the tertiary sector. These are the two sectors which have actually powered our 8.2 GDP rise. Because mainly the primary sector, they have seen a modest growth, which is kind of a growth which signals that the rural demand or the rural economic activities are improving very slightly. Now, when we go on to manufacturing, it has improved by 9.1%, and this is the best in 3 quarters, right? Why? Because in recent times, the Indian government has actually launched a slew of manufacturing initiatives. You can name some of them in the comments below. And that is why, according to the economists, if we can kind of compare in the last year, we actually had kind of lower manufacturing. Right now, the manufacturing has increased by lots. So this means we have started from a lower base, and that is why when we are comparing from the lower base, we are having a higher percentage of growth. And right now we are also seeing construction and the various other activities which have improved manufacturing and the secondary sector, and generally economists are kind of commenting that the base effects have boosted manufacturing in the recent times. Now when we talk about the tertiary sector, the financial, the real estate and the professional services grew by more than 10%, and this is what is fueling the demand. Now this is a very important fact for our Indian economic story. Why? Because our domestic demand is resilient. Next, when we talk about the investment figures or the gross fixed capital formation, it is at 7.3%. But what is more interesting is that mostly this growth in the investment was due to private investments. And according to various economists, right, these private investments are improving, and this is good for the country because more of the investments are going into research and development, setting up new factories, hiring new workers, and it is good for the GDP because it will be improving in the future. And also we have to understand there are other risks too, such as the geopolitical crisis, the tariffs of the US. While those concerns are there, let us be content for this quarter that the private investment has improved. On the other hand, the government investment, that has fallen by around 2.7%. Next, we also have to appreciate the manufacturing progress, right? The secondary sector, as we have just seen, has bounced back. Next, we have to also reduce our dependence on any single sector, and that is exactly what we have to understand. For decades, the Indian economy was riding primarily on the service sector. But right now we have seen how the industries are improving, and the demand is improving in those sectors, more investments are coming in. So this is good for the Indian economy. Also, such good GDP growth also is easier for the RBI to accommodate in its own figures, because according to the recent inflation figures, as you can see, it is around 0.2%. The CPI is quite low at 0.2%, and this actually can give RBI some room to reduce the interest rates, right? And if we can reduce the interest rates, because the inflation is actually quite low, it can create more demand, right? And this demand can be fueling more investments in the future, and this can lead to better GDP figures in the future. So it will be good for the monetary easing too. And at the end of the day, the exports have also improved, but there are various geopolitical risks which needs to be factored in the future quarters. So this was all for this article. We'll be now moving on to the final one. Guys, Cyclone Ditwa has struck Sri Lanka very hard, and this is exactly why Indian government is trying to give relief and humanitarian operations to the country. So in this respect, we are going to understand Operation Sagar's Bandhu and various other operations which are delineated for the same cause. Now, when we talk about Sagar Bandhu, right, this was due to the disaster which struck place due to the cyclone Ditwa. And this has left around 56 people as of yesterday. Also, this affected around 44,000 people, creating floods and landslides. So this is exactly what our own government of India believes in: neighborhood first policy and a broader vision, Mahasagar, which tries to unite the Indian Ocean and its countries along with India's own maritime cooperation, maritime humanitarian operations, and so on. So this is exactly how Indian Navy and its aircraft carrier INS Vikrant and the frontline ship INS Udaygiri was used for such humanitarian operations. Apart from this, for your prelims examinations, we also have a list of various other operations which India did on a global scale and on a domestic scale. For example, we had the Operation Maitri during Nepal earthquake, Operation Karuna during Myanmar cyclone, Dost during Turkey and Syria after a powerful earthquake there, Operation Sukoon between the Israel and Hezbollah conflict at Lebanon, also Operation Sadbhav, which was a kind of an emergency aid to Myanmar, Laos and Vietnam. On the Indian aspect, we have seen Operation Rahat, which was kind of led by Indian Air Force at Uttarakhand. Later it was followed on by Operation Surya Hope. Later on, the army also joined the same thing in Operation Ganga Prahar. Then in 2004, we had the Operation Mahad, and in 2018 Kerala floods, the same thing also was delineated. And at the end, we had the Operation Megh Rahat of 2014, which was due to the floods in Jammu and Kashmir. So this was all for the day. I thank you all for being a very patient audience. We will be meeting up again very soon. Please do attempt the quiz which will be following up. So all the best and best of luck. Thank you.